Welcome all. This is Srimayi Majumdar from Swami Vivekananda Institute of Modern Science. In the last lab, we had covered part 1 of barriers of communication. In the earlier part, we had dealt with semantics, problems with semantics or language barrier, and we had also spoken about barriers which are physical barriers which are palpable barriers, and we shall continue with the problems of barriers, different kinds of the areas which stop communication channel, which we in other words may call noise, capital NOISE. All those obstacles which stop the communication, a smooth communication, are barriers. In this part, we shall talk about organizational barriers and psychological barriers. When we deal with organizational barriers, there are 4 areas which we shall look into. The first is organization rules and regulations. In the corporate world, we are very much tied up by certain rules and regulations, behavioral rules, spoken rules. We are not allowed to interact informally, casually among the seniors and juniors. So, therefore, communication is always rule bound. And since communication is rule bound in the corporate world, easy flow of communication or talking freely to the seniors or being very informal to the juniors are not allowed, and this can be a barrier in easy casual interaction among people in the corporate world. In the second step, we find that if we have lack of staff meeting, then there will be gaps in the communication, informational gaps in the communication. Staff aid meeting is one tool which helps us to interact, to interchange official news among each other. Therefore, this is another point which should be looked into. In the third case, we may find that we have used a wrong channel for an important news. In the official space, supposing for an appointment, if it is only verbal, then it does not hold good at all. Or if it is only a telephonic instruction of an important event, then it is not good at all. Therefore, using the right material, whether it is email, whether it is audiovisual, whether it is a printed material, the right medium must be used for the correct transmission of message. And in the last lab, we have a problem which is completely hierarchical. As messages as messages are transferred from the highest level to the lowest level, from the highest category to the lowest category, when messages are transferred, the content of the messages may be changed, distorted, missing, and when it finally comes down to the bottom level, the 80% or 90% of the message may be lost. An important instruction with all its different angles may come down to the first, second, third level. After that, the major message may lose its content and credibility when it comes to the bottom. We now come to a major area of barrier. This barrier is psychological barrier. This is totally based on man's emotions, sentiments, outlooks, physical conditions. There are mental stages, mental blocks, which may create a barrier, big time barrier in communication. First, let us look into selective perception. Every human being may not have the same perception or the same level of perception. The depth of understanding may be different. When we look at, supposing, the idea of cleanliness, the idea of religion, the idea of free mixing, these are the areas where perception can vary man to man. And it is here the style of communication will also vary. A free living, a free mental makeup may allow a person to communicate better or receive better, but a person whose entire concept, social, personal ideas are within a typical framework, he or she may not accept or transfer a communication effectively. The second point says premature evaluation. It is very normal for a human being, and particularly in this age of rush, age of time constraint, we come to this particular malady called premature evaluation. We do not allow the speaker to continue, and before he has come to the main content, we evaluate him, we judge him, we come to the conclusion about the speaker and his content. This is one of the biggest psychological problems, that we do not give ourselves time, neither do we give time to the speaker, and we make judgments. The next point says we draw wrong inferences. Inferences are conclusions. Why do we make wrong inferences? If my conclusion is this, the other man's conclusion may be totally different. This depends on the social background, the economic background, academic background, how we comprehend reality from each angle. This is totally different for each man. This is totally different from each other. Therefore, the psychological bent, one may have a very liberal bent, one may have a very conservative bent towards the same problem, and therefore the inferences, the conclusions will be different, the language will be different, the reaction, the communication will be totally different. We come to the next part, hierarchical attitude. In the corporate world, there is this big mental division between the seniors and juniors. Seniors feel that they are cut above the juniors, and they are not in a position to have a free interaction with juniors. Their ego, their prestige, their sense of superiority stops them from free interaction with juniors. Similarly, in the case of juniors, they are also subdued by the authority, by the ego of the seniors. They are always afraid to reach out to the seniors. This is one big drawback in the corporate world, where hierarchical attitude and the mental makeup of this hierarchy stops people from interacting with each other. The next point is interesting. It is called poor listening. This area generally is focused on the seniors, or people who are in a higher position, or people who are very overconfident. Such people do not allow themselves to listen to others. They select areas which to them are worth listening, and they reject areas which to them are not worth listening. This is a this creates a big gap in understanding, in comprehending, in coming to conclusions about any matter. Generally, the superior class have this fault of poor listening, because listening and paying attention to others is one of the most important areas of proper communication. People who have this superiority complex in different and notions have this malady called poor listening, and this creates a big block in the communication process. Lastly, we will talk about egotism and emotions. Ego is related to man's superiority complex, as we have already said. Therefore, people who have big egos are not good listeners. They do not pay attention to other people's words. They think they know everything, and they negate communication, overall communication with others. The last part is the emotional content of man. If we are high strung with either happiness or sadness, communication at that point becomes impossible. When we are down with sadness, negative emotions like jealousy, negative emotions like rejection, we refuse to listen to other people's words. At the same time, in an opposite way, if we are very, very elated, excited about something, we may not be able to communicate, may not be able to encode our words, our emotions, because at that point we are too excited. We may not be able to express what we actually feel, express logically, and therefore too much of emotions, two extremes of emotions can be a problem. Now, what are the ways to overcome such barriers? First, man must be open minded. Man must not have emotional hang ups. Man must not have social hang ups. There should not be mental restrictions towards any kind of communication. An open minded approach, either in the corporate world or in the social world, we must allow people to come to us. This is also connected with in the later part we will talk about the open door policy. If we have open hearts, open minds, we can have simple, clear, understandable, easy communication with everyone. Second, we must allow ourselves, push ourselves into effective listening. Unless and until we listen to other people's words, their feelings, their emotions, their content, their ideas, man cannot react logically towards any situation, be it personal, social, or corporate. Therefore, let us allow ourselves to proper listening. In the third part, we have used a word synergy, synergistic environment. What does the word synergy mean? Synergy means is proper alignment in equation with the environment. If the environment is favorable, then the speaker or speakers can receive and give both the sender and receiver in a comfortable zone. For example, in a classroom, if the sound system is not working, then the class may fall flat. Similarly, in a public speech platform, if the microphone is not working, then it is not a synergistic environment. When a person on the other side is mentally extremely vulnerable, in a vulnerable state, that is not a synergistic moment to talk to him. So, synergy means having a favorable space between the sender and the receiver of the message where they can give and receive messages in a favorable condition. Next, we must use the correct words. We must have the correct emotions while we are speaking to others. Suitable words with suitable emotions is a total package. Without this total package, communication cannot be transferred to the sender. A formal letter where an appointment is fixed and another formal letter where a person is fired must not have the same emotion. Similarly, congratulatory note and a note of departure cannot have the same emotions and words. Next point is open communication. What do we mean by open communication? I had already referred to this point earlier. We mean that open door communication. Open door communication means door is open where people can come in and clarify their doubts or inform something important. In the corporate world, we must have this particular policy of open door communication. Lastly, we must use the correct channel, the correct medium. As we have already said, the correct channel in case of formal, whether it is email, whether it is telephone, whether it is a hard copy, and the proper language. And if we are speaking, then we must have proper intonation, proper body language, so that the message is complete in its meaning, in its emotion, both in its visible world as well as in its virtual world. To conclude the chapters on barrier, we are thankful that barrier is one of the important chapters which had been analyzed very well by Shannon Weaver, and they had come up with ideas of these barriers. And if we are not aware of the barriers in communication, if we do not know how to clear these blockages, communication will not be successful. I hope that in the two parts of barriers of communication, we have been able to give a glimpse of the problems in the communication passage. We have been able to illuminate what should be done on the platform, both from the point of view of a speaker as well as the listener. And I hope it is a productive session. Thank you so much for being with us.